Hi, I'm Misty with Wildflower Wellness, and welcome to my channel. I am a coach, I am a fitness professional, and I am a licensed mental health therapist. So, today we are going to tackle the topic of emotional eating. So, we're going to talk about what emotional eating is. How do you define it? We are also going to talk about the different types of hunger and the reasons that we eat as humans. Why do we choose to eat? When do we choose to eat? And what is that rooted in? And next, we are going to talk about if you decide or if you know you're struggling with emotional eating, what do you do with that? How do you change that? And how do you learn to tackle that and move that into something productive? So, emotional eating is when we consume foods based off our emotional state rather than our physiological needs and our physiological hunger. I think even more important than defining what it means, it's important to understand what the struggles are that comes along with emotional eating. So, if you are an emotional eater, you might struggle with some of the following. You might struggle with yo-yo dieting. You also might struggle with feeling like you have a lack of consistency in your routines. You might even feel a little emotionally unstable. I think a big one that comes with emotional eating is constantly being worried about what you ate that day, constantly being worried about what you might eat and what you should eat. Also, what comes along with emotional eating a lot of times is having body image struggles. Are you consumed with the way you look in the mirror? Do you look in the mirror and often feel like you're unsatisfied with what you see? So when we eat, we kind of just get in this routine of not understanding why we're eating and what's rooted in that choice. So there are different reasons why we choose to eat. It's not always just a physiological hunger, but that is a huge reason why we eat, right? That's the number one reason that we eat is from physiological hunger. A physiological hunger comes when our body is depleted from nutrients. We need more nutrients, we need more calories, we don't have enough energy, and our body is telling us, you need to feed me. I need to produce for you. I need to move. I need to be able to think. And so it's saying, give me foods. Our foods provide macro and micronutrients that break down for energy metabolism. And so those are necessary. Physiological hunger, if that's what you're experiencing, it's going to have such symptoms of like hunger pangs. You're going to feel that stomach growl. But you're also, if you're physiologically hungry, then you are also probably have some low blood sugar symptoms. Maybe some people don't experience that, some people do. But those are things that are actually going to happen with physiological hunger. You might even be a little bit irritable. So another reason that we choose to eat is because of learned behaviors. It's behavioral hunger. It is something that is ingrained in us because of our past. The way that we form our choices and the way we think and the way we behave is based on our past. So if you, for example, your family, you woke up every day and from the time that you were young until now, you have a habit of eating breakfast every day, then that might be not necessarily a physiological cue for hunger, but that one might be more of a behavioral cue, something that learned, something that was ingrained in you that you have always just done. Another thing that is behavioral is social eating. So when you go out with friends, well, a lot of people just go to a restaurant, right? That's something to do. It's something you can gather around food and you can enjoy. And so, yes, that also is behavioral. And that's not, those things aren't necessarily bad things. It's just that when we get dominant in that area, then we can form negative habits. Okay, now let's dig into emotional hunger. So, emotional hunger comes from eating when we feel emotion, right? Just like the topic says, we eat when we feel emotion. When we become heavily dominant in emotional eating, there can be lots of negative health outcomes and even some emotional and some mental health outcomes as well that maybe aren't productive for you in your life. So, emotional eating, we will maybe choose to eat when we are sad, when we are angry, when we're lonely, even sometimes when we're happy. We feel those emotions, we feel that flood of emotion, that physiological response that emotions cause, and we don't really know what to do with that uncomfortable feeling. And so when we have that uncomfortable feeling, automatically brain tells us, okay, go to food because food is going to give you that dopamine release that is going to make you feel pleasure. So our dopamine is a chemical in our brain that is released when we do things that are pleasurable and it's necessary. And so, if we deem eating food as pleasurable, then our brain is going to release dopamine. And so, there's a physiological component to emotional eating as well that we need that dopamine release. But a lot of times we go to that to maybe cover up what we're really feeling inside. Are we stressed at work and we don't really know what to do with that overwhelming feeling? And so we go grab a pint of ice cream when we get home, or we stop and grab fast food because we are stressed, we don't have enough time. Now, a lot of times when we emotionally eat, we actually choose foods that are high in fat, high in sugar, that are really processed. And so, therefore, they don't necessarily have a lot of bang for their buck. We're eating these foods that aren't necessarily nutritionally dense. And so, they're kind of a lot of empty calories, empty energy we're putting it into our body, and we're not getting a lot out of it. And so, that's one big detriment to emotionally eating. Now, I want to talk for a second about an eating disorder versus disordered eating. Those are two different things. So, there are eating disorders that are in the DSM that are pathological that you have to be diagnosed with. And that's not necessarily always the case. If you are struggling with emotional eating, that doesn't mean you have an eating disorder. A large percentage of the population struggles with disordered eating. So, on the other hand, disordered eating is when you have developed patterns that maybe aren't based on physiological hunger and they maybe become out of control. Now, we all have a combination, a dynamic combination of all three of those types of hunger. All of us eat for physiological reasons, all of us eat for emotional reasons, and all of us eat for behavioral reasons. Now, like I said, when it's dominant in social or behavioral or dominant in emotional, it can become harmful to us. So it's when that kind of tells us we need to kind of fall back into tapping into our physiological hunger and become more mindful of what's going on around us and what's going on inside of us. Okay, so if you struggle with any of these things that we've talked about and you're wondering, how do I fix it? How do I change my cycle? What do I do to have a different outcome? How do I find more consistency? How do I stop being obsessed with what I have eaten and what I'm going to eat? How do I stop that guilt and shame cycle? Well, we have to create an awareness, first of all, because there has to be a connection between our emotion, our thought, and our behavior. If you don't create that connection and that awareness of what's happening, then change becomes impossible. It's just like a fight against our willpower. So we have to tap into our own emotional center. We have to tap into what we're thinking and then why we choose what we're doing to be able to gain an awareness over ourselves. Okay, so now what do we do with that now? What do we do with this information? Okay, we start to create an awareness. I want to give you three questions that you can ask yourself so you can gain more of an insight over yourself, over your emotions, over your thoughts and your behaviors, right? So the first question you want to ask yourself is, how would I describe my own eating habits? When, where, and how do I eat? So if you sit down and kind of journal about this for just a second and notice that when you eat, notice what's going on around you when you eat. What are your habits? What types of foods do you eat? Write that down and notice any patterns that start to develop. The second question I want you to ask yourself is, how does stress affect my eating patterns? So we all kind of categorize stress. It's kind of a general term that we deem as just emotion, right? We feel some sort of emotion and it's resulting in this physiological stress we feel. So, how does stress affect your eating patterns? Take a second, think back, jot down when you feel stressed, what do you do? Okay, and the third question that I want you to ask yourself to create more awareness is, when am I most likely to eat poorly and why is that? So if we can kind of connect a pattern as to when I choose to eat poorly and what's going on around me, then we're going to create more awareness about our emotional eating patterns and habits. Creating that awareness is the most important part to change. I can't say that enough, that if you don't have an awareness over yourself and your patterns and your habits, then it is almost impossible to change. So sit down with those questions, journal them, see what you come out with, see what new information you learn about yourself. We know that emotional eating is when you choose to eat from the response of your emotions. Your emotions cause some discomfort. And to cope with that, you choose to eat to help yourself feel better. It's actually common and it actually can be painful and it can be frustrating. And I totally get it. I've experienced that before. I've had to work through it. So if you are struggling with any of the symptoms of emotional eating, which would be yo yo dieting, maybe body image struggles, constantly thinking about what it is that you should eat, or maybe guilt and shame from the things that you did eat, then please click on the link in my bio and I would love to help you. Again, I'm Misty Olson and I'm a fitness professional. I'm a coach and I'm also a licensed mental health therapist. Check out my link below and I would love to have you subscribe. See you later.